Okay, good afternoon. My name is Hugh Sung, assistant of the Oral History Program here at the Battleship New Jersey, docked in Camden, New Jersey. And today is Wednesday, July 11th, 2018. We are on board the Battleship New Jersey, and our interview guest is David Dearie from Murrieta, California. David Dearie was a crew member who served on board the USS New Jersey during the 1980s and retired from the Navy with the rank of Command Master Chief, correct?
That's correct.
All right. Okay, Master Chief Dearie, welcome home.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Okay, so let's begin by asking, what is your current age?
I am 52 years old.
Okay. And when did you join the Navy?
I joined the Navy December 26, 1984.
Okay. And what was your inspiration to join the Navy?
Well, I graduated high school, didn't like pumping gas, wasn't a fan of continuing fast food employment, and I tried going to college, but you have to actually stay and attend classes in order to actually go to school. So there was a Marine that worked at the gas station with me, and a staff sergeant, and he actually encouraged me to consider the military. So I had nothing else to lose. Figure what an easy way to get out of the house. And I talked to some Marines living in Southern California. I also talked to some sailors. And my best friend in high school was in boot camp during all this. And I waited until Charlie got out of boot camp. I said, Charlie, how hard is boot camp? And he said, it wasn't so bad, Dave, except for that shot in the butt. That was the worst part. And so I said, okay, then I'll go in the Navy. And so I joined the Navy. I figured, 18 years old, give them 4 years of my life to serve my country. What's the worst that could happen? I'll be 22 when I get out, and then I can be a little bit more grown up, a little bit more mature, and consider going to school then. There's a long answer to a short question.
Okay. And where was boot camp for you?
San Diego, so I didn't have to do the shot in the butt. But no, so went to boot camp. So I joined December 26th, and I went into the delayed entry program. So March 25th of 1985 is when I actually went on active duty. When I joined the Navy, I joined as an AZ, the rate of aviation yeoman. And my dad, who worked downtown San Diego at the time, who also served in the Navy during the Vietnam era as a radioman. I ran up to his office and I said, Dad, I did it. I signed up. I'm going to be an AZ. He said, an ass. I don't want you to be that. And he got on the phone to the head recruiter in San Diego, and they had me changed to a radioman. So that's how I ended up going to boot camp in San Diego, because Radioman A school was in boot camp.
Okay.
No, it was in San Diego.
So boot camp and A school were there, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So anything that stands out you remember from boot camp?
From boot camp, a lot of marching. The thing about boot camp is you figure you're taking 60, 70 guys from all over the country, from all different walks of life, and even think about the 1980s. In fact, where I grew up in Southern California, there was 3 African Americans in my high school, and the high school size was about 500 or 600. And so then to show up to boot camp, and there's a wide range, a mixture of ethnicity and people, but within 24 hours, you have your head shaved. You all look like Smurfs. You're all wearing blue dungarees. You're lost and confused. You all look the same, except maybe the color of your skin. But that coming together, that commonality, really, it's the first time I think that somebody experiences that kind of family, that kind of teamwork, that kind of relationship, especially as a bunch of guys. And that's something that carries with, I think, anybody that serves in the military. You don't really experience that in the civilian world. So, that's a memory. Another memory is we were the worst unit in boot camp for marching. And I can remember when we finally got an award in the marching competition. I think we were the last company, actually, that hadn't got the award. That's why we finally got the award. But I can remember when we marched through these other divisions, how they cheered and hoot and hollered for us. So that was pretty cool. Overall, it was a different time, boot camp then, than it is now. But it wasn't bad. It was fun. Looking back, I never seen fun at the time, but looking back, it was fun.
Oh, very good. So after boot camp, right to A school, correct?
And I went to A school and C school. So Radioman A school, and then I went to Morse Code C school. Yeah.
All right. Was C school also in San Diego?
But yeah, it was in San Diego as well.
Oh, wow. So all
right there.
Oh, yeah. Very good. So anything you remember about A school?
So A school was Radioman was the biggest rate next to corpsman at the time. So we did A school was around the clock. I was on the mid shift. The nice thing about mids was I actually had a barracks room with 2 roommates. People who are on days of mids were in open bay barracks. We don't have open bay barracks in the military anymore. So that was unique that I had my own like dorm, if you will. And then after A school was C school, and I went to my first captain's mast in C school. So you always have to go once, I think. And I got in trouble for underage drinking, having alcohol in my cubicle, and then lying to the chief. I tried sharing the story with my dad. He called me out as being a liar right away, and he said I need to go back and tell the chief the truth. So the next day I did, and then during NJP in front of Commander Volk, and conveying the story. And mind you, there's about 10 of us who got busted for alcoholism, rhyme or reason. And the commander, the captain, he actually looked to that senior chief who I had lied to and said, "Tell me about Seaman Dearie." And that senior chief could have said any number of things. And I think that because I had followed my dad's advice and fessed up to him and apologized, he didn't say anything negative about me. And so my case was dismissed. Although the captain said, "I'm going to dismiss it, but you wait for me outside my office." And then he chewed me up pretty good privately. But there's a memory for you.
Anything from C school?
So my C school wasn't so that C school, that was it from C school, because I didn't do another C school until later on after I re-enlisted. And then that second C school was teletype repair, and that was in 1980, after I left the New Jersey in 1985. There was no significant memories then. I went to teletype repair school. I'm not very mechanically inclined. What you tell me was broken, I can fix it. But I didn't do so well as far as identifying what needs to be fixed.
Okay, so after A school, you went to your first assignment, correct?
Went to the USNS Regal, which is a supply ship that was home ported out of Norfolk.
All right. Anything you remember from that ship?
So the Regal USNS, they don't fall into the normal seashore rotation or underway responsibilities as a USNS, United States Naval ship. So they're merchant marine ships that the U.S. Navy owns, and there's a small military detachment. And being a radioman, we did the communications. And so in the 13 months on board, I did 3 med cruises. So we'd go over to the med for 2.5 to 3 months. We'd come back from Norfolk to 2 to 3 weeks. We'd turn back around and head back over. I will tell you, crossing the Atlantic in the winter, some of the most ferocious storms, and literally walking with 1 foot on the bulkhead and 1 foot on the deck as the ship is going through some of these storms was pretty incredible. Traveling Europe, Spain, Italy, Israel, France, the different cultures, seeing the relationship of the European culture that started the United States. As a young 19-year-old by that time, it was pretty neat, pretty interesting. But it was good. I mean, it was a neat way to start the Navy career. But I'll tell you, USNS isn't like a USS. And so, of the 20 or so military on board, being the young California kid, they didn't think that I would survive on a USS ship. They didn't think I had what it would take. And so when I came up for orders, I called my detailer, and I specifically asked to go to the USS New Jersey, because I figured I wanted to prove to myself that the most difficult USS ship I could think of, to prove them wrong. And so the detailer, he went ahead and cut me orders to go back to the West Coast to a battleship. That's how I ended up here.
Okay, so the New Jersey was your second ship, right?
That was my second ship, yes.
Okay, so when you first saw the Battleship New Jersey, what was your initial reaction?
Big. Yeah. So big. And just massive. I mean, not that the supply ship wasn't big, but it's different. I mean, this is a warship. I mean, everybody, the 16-inch guns. I mean, that's what these ships are known for, whether it's the Iowa class or the ones before. I mean, just this big, ferocious machine. Yeah.
So what was your initial reaction when you were first heard that you were coming to this battleship?
Oh, I was excited because of what I wanted, and I didn't really, I think a lot of us when we joined the military, and we start off away from home, maybe we gravitate towards wanting to get back home or get back to Southern California. Unfortunately, I didn't spend a lot of time on the East Coast. Like I said, the 13 months back here, I was deployed for 9 of those. But I was excited to be able to get, at least get back to the West Coast.
Okay, so coming on the Battleship New Jersey, this was 1986?
So end of 86.
Okay, the end of 86? Okay. So what was your first, duty there? You mind talking about your, battle
Well, I
stations?
came here as an RM, a seaman, Radioman E3, and then shortly after checking on board, I actually got promoted to E4. And, there was 1,500 people on board at the time, and there was about 35 or 40 in OC division for Radioman, and I was one of the lower ranked ones. So my duty, a lot of cleaning, a lot of painting. We went into an upkeep period, and the ship went into the dry dock. This was in Long Beach. So it was hot, fire watches. It wasn't like many young military, many young sailors. I didn't join the Navy for this. I joined the Navy to do whatever the job is. I didn't join to serve food on the mess decks as a mess crank or to paint the bulkheads or any of the stuff, strip and wax these decks. I wanted to go and do what I was trained to do, which I didn't really get to do on here for over a year.
Oh, well, you eventually did do...
I eventually got to be a radioman.
Okay.
But yeah, in fact, one of the duties I had, thinking about it, was we had a burn room. And so you have to get rid of classified material. Today we all use shredders. Or on a ship underway, and back then nothing was electronic, so we printed out message traffic. And you put your classified messages in burn bags. You take the burn bags to radio. We had them all serialized. We had to log them out and log them back in. And then when you're underway for long periods of time, you have to destroy these burn bags. And the way we destroyed them on here, there's a burn room, a huge incinerator. And so I used to have to go down there and throw these things in a big incinerator. And then I crawl up inside the smokestack because the ash would collect in the smokestack. And we had this little sprinkler applicator that as the ash would go up, would wet it down. And I'd have to go clean that ash that would build up, even if we're underway. And so you imagine the heat of the smoke from the boilers coming up. And I'm crawling up there with these coveralls, getting covered with soot. So, yeah, that's just one of my jobs, too.
So where was the incinerator located?
It was down on your way to the mess decks. I'd probably recognize the door if I walked by it later.
Oh, okay. Right. Now, did you have a general quarters station?
I did, down transmitters. That was my GQ station. Went down there earlier today.
Right. And that was your general quarters stations when you first came on?
Yeah, my whole time here I was always in transmitters.
Okay. So what was it like during general quarters?
When it was a drill, it was fine. When you actually had a fire or a lube oil leak, it was a little more stressful because the transmitter room was in the engineering spaces, and you locked down in that giant steel box of 6-inch solid steel. And so if the fire ever got out of control, you were kind of toast, literally. You weren't getting out. That never happened, but as a young kid, you think about these things. But nothing like that ever happened.
So how much time did you have to get to general quarters?
Oh gosh, 4 minutes is the goal on any ship. You want to get there inside of 4 minutes. It didn't usually take me that long. The transmitter room wasn't that far from Radio Central, and Radio Central wasn't that far from my berthing space. So unless I was off doing something else on the ship when it happened to take place, and then if you're familiar, even if you watch an old movie, and the ship goes to general quarters, they tell you up and forward, starboard side, down and aft port, and so you have certain directions of the ship you have to go. So you may have to go the long way around to get to it, but 4 minutes, you should be there.
All right. 4 minutes, is that standard on all ships,
Yes.
or did it vary?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Standard on all ships.
Okay.
You always want to do better than that, but that's what you're graded on.
Okay. So why don't you talk about everyday life on board the battleship?
So everyday life on the battleship, you're going to stand watches. In radio, we worked 7-10. Let's see. We did a day watch of 7 hours, 7 hours off, came back for a 10-hour mid-watch, 7 hours off, came back for a 7-hour eve watch, 10 hours off. So it was port and starboard, So when you weren't working, you were off, but you didn't have a whole lot of time. We just did these 7, 7, and 10s. When you weren't working, you were doing maintenance. You were studying, because if you were going up for advancement exams, you would study. You would eat. You would go to the gym. You would try to sleep. You play cards. You watch movies. Back then, we didn't have computers and private movies or anything. We had internal TV that they would show movies on. But that was kind of it. You eat, sleep, work, work out.
Okay. Speaking of movies, you didn't get like any signals from like other stations?
No.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We didn't have satellite movies or anything. We get AFRTS would send us tapes.
I see. And there was a gym on board?
There was a gym.
Okay.
And it was probably in a couple different spaces, but I remember it being back aft of the mess decks. Below the mess decks, there was a ship store back there. It was near the ship store.
Okay. And you mentioned entertainment, like were there card games?
Yeah, there were some card games.
Okay.
Yeah, you just kind of create your own entertainment. Sometimes you have entertainment by sending people out to look for things, like mail buoy watch or a B1RD, maybe an AIR box. Yeah.
Good. So you mentioned food there, right?
Food.
How was it like?
Not the best.
Oh.
It was edible, but when you're underway for longer periods of time, you run out of your fresh fruits and vegetables. You make do with what you can get. The eggs were always fresh. Eggs were always fresh. You always get your eggs to order in the morning. But again, it was 30 years ago. I do remember Bruce Townley. Bruce always put ketchup on his rice, and I never saw that before. And to this day, I've never met anybody that put ketchup on rice. And then when you're trying to eat, so we would do live fire exercises, and above the mess decks was turret 3. And it's pretty high, so a couple of things I can remember during chow was if we ever fired turret 3, dust would come out of the overhead. It was so high, nobody could ever clean up there. And so dust would come out of the overhead, and when you're underway and rocking and rolling, sometimes your tray would slide across the table to the next guy, and you have to wait. So you hold on to it.
Yeah, I hear about that. Yeah, I heard about that from some veterans.
Yeah, which you don't realize on a ship this big and this wide that it would happen, but it does.
Now, your first commanding officer was Captain Glenn, correct?
Captain Glenn.
Okay. You ever met him?
If I did, I don't remember it. It was a short period of time before the change of command, and then we had Captain Katz.
Okay.
And Katz, I've met Captain Katz multiple times. In fact, I can remember one time. Nice thing as a radioman, you have to deliver message traffic, especially if you're a junior radioman, like I was most of my time here as an E4. Hey, Dearie, go take this up to the captain. Go take this message or whatever. And so, one of my message runs, this book had just come out on the ship, and we sold it at the ship store. So I took my book up to him. And it's funny now, as a seasoned sailor and as a master chief, I couldn't believe a sailor would do this. But as a young E4, you don't realize. So I took this book. I said, "Hey, Captain, would you mind signing my book for me?" So he autographed and best wishes or something like that. So I have that book. But Captain Katz was a neat guy. He drove an old VW Thing convertible to work every day. Just a really good guy. Yeah, we liked him. The crew really liked him.
Okay. You can't compare the difference between him and Glenn?
No.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I assumed you didn't see Glenn that often. So.
I really don't remember him.
Okay. Have you met any of the XOs while you're on board?
Well, no.
Okay.
No.
Any admirals were on board?
Yeah, Captain Kahuni. Admiral Kahuni, not Captain. Admiral Kahuni was on board. He was the Commander Cruiser Destroyer Group 5. He was embarked on board for a season. And a neat guy, short, but if you did some research on him, I don't think you'd ever find anybody that had said anything negative about Admiral Kahuni. I think he retired as a 3-star. And so he came into radio, and I could type pretty well, so they used to have me type a lot of message traffic. So the Admiral, back in those days, they used to literally, they would write on a napkin what they wanted their messages to say, or a piece of paper or whatever. So he came into radio one time, and the chief said, "Hey, Dearie, type this up for the Admiral." and it was on a napkin, and so I clipped it to the teletype, and I'm typing away, and the Admiral's talking to the chief, and I'm like, hey Admiral, excuse me, can you help me out? I can't read your chicken scratch right here. So he came over here and he told me what it was, and I kept, and boy, after he left, Chief got so mad at me for, you can't call the handwriting chicken scratch to the Admiral. Well, it was, and I couldn't read it. I mean, dude, my attitude, he's a man just like me, puts his pants on the same way I do. But that's how young sailors think. Young military just think that way. The naivety of it. We don't recognize that until we're in a little longer, the rank structure. And I think that senior officers and even senior enlisted, we appreciate that. Because as a leader, you need some of that frank input from your juniors sometimes that your seniors aren't going to give you. So yeah, that was the one Admiral. He was a cool dude. I can remember another guy, Alvin Smith, Armed through Alvin Smith. He got killed a number of years ago from a drunk driver, but Alvin was from L.A. But he ran some message traffic up to CEC, where the Admiral was, and he came back to radios. Man, I got to sit in the Admiral's chair. And the Admiral's like, hey, Smitty, why don't you have a seat for a little bit and let Smith hang out in the Admiral's seat up in combat. That's just the kind of guy he was.
Very good. Were you on board during any change of command ceremonies?
Well, I told you, the first Admiral Glenn and Admiral Katz, that change of command.
So what was that ceremony like?
It was just long and hot, man. I was an E4 in whites on the stinking out in the heat of Long Beach. It was long. It was white. The last place I wanted. I mean, long. It was. You don't want to be there. It's just not fun.
Okay.
It is what it is. I mean.
While you were on board the New Jersey, did you visit any ports?
Yes. So went on a Westpac and left in, I think it was June or July of 1988. We stopped first in South Korea. From South Korea, went to Subic Bay, Philippines. From Subic, we went down to Fremantle, Australia, and then we actually sailed underneath Australia, which is really rare to do. And we went around and came up the other side and went to Hobart, Tasmania, Brisbane, and Sydney. And I can remember in Brisbane we were there for the World's Fair, and in Sydney we were there for Australia's, I think it was their bicentennial anniversary. And I can remember we showed. They wouldn't let us pull until a day after all the other ships because being the battleship, and we had a bunch of media come on board. And the weapons officer actually used to let me. I used to, like taking pictures, in high school. So the neat thing being a radioman, all these department heads used to come by radio, get their message traffic in the morning. So I got to know the weapons officer a little bit, and I say, hey, Weps, can I go out on the forecastle during gun shoots? And he said, sure. Just make sure you have double hearing protection. So I used to go all the time. I'd go underneath, up to the forecastle, just on the other side of the capstans, the Wildcats, and set up my camera and take photos. And so I knew feeling the blast of the heat from the turrets, as well as how the ship would get moved. You've heard the stories how the ship get pushed sideways in the water. And we would, whether it was a single turret or a whole 21 gun broadside. And so we had all this news media. And he said, hey, Dearie, go with the, you're familiar with it, go with the PIO up there with all this news media. And I told these guys, you don't want to put your cameras on tripods and leave them sitting there. They didn't listen. And we did a big broadside, and I cannot tell you how many cameras fell from that broadside. But then after they did the show of the force, to the media, then they pulled us into Sydney, and then we did a big parade of ships at night, fireworks and stuff, and it was really neat.
Any other ports stand out?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, South Korea stands out because the ship, even though we were anchored, big storm, we were anchored, Liberty launches. We didn't get back to the ship that night. There's about 8 of us on Liberty together. We had about $20 combined. We had enough money to buy some food and go stay in a youth hostel, and then we were able to get a cab back in the morning. So, we were wet because it was rainy. We had no changes of clothes. So that was kind of interesting. Subic Bay was interesting. It was just crazy. And Hawaii, the last port visit before we got back stateside was wonderful. We were there for Halloween, and wow, Halloween in Hawaii is a big deal. Yeah, it was great.
So how was Halloween like in Hawaii?
Oh, everybody's into it. Everybody's dressing up like crazy. Loved Hawaii. I was there for like 2 or 3 days. So I couldn't wait to get back there. In fact, I later on got orders to the Commander 3rd Fleet, who was home ported in Hawaii, embarked aboard the USS Coronado. Man, I re-enlisted for those orders. 6 weeks later, they re-home ported to San Diego.
Yeah. Did you go through Pearl Harbor as well?
Yeah, went through Pearl Harbor. Mm-hmm.
Did you pass by the Arizona Memorial?
Absolutely. Passed by Arizona. We have paid our respects, threw a wreath in the water. Always do a moment of silence as we go by, hand salute.
Okay.
Some colors.
Right. Did you remember going through the Panama Canal?
Never went to the Battleship.
Okay. What about crossing the equator?
Yeah, I'm a golden shellback on board New Jersey.
Oh.
So we crossed the equator. Did that on that 1988 deployment. Yeah.
Oh. Anything you remember from that?
It was hot. It was disgusting. They had collected food for over 2 weeks. You know what a slip and slide is, right? So imagine a slip and slide, but like an enclosed chute that had to be, it had to be a mile long. At least it felt like it. And there was 2 weeks worth of food in there. And I went through at about 10 or 11 in the morning. And so imagine how many of us 1,000 or more sailors had gone, and Marines went through before us, crawling through all that old nasty food, and this is on the equator in the summer, so it was well over 100 degrees. So I'm sure there was more than food that I'm crawling through. And so you're crawling through that. Plus, you know, you're getting shillelagh'd along the way. And if you don't know what a shillelagh is, take a piece of 1.5 or 2.5 inch, those are your choices of fire hose, and you cut it down, and you put some line around one end to make a nice firm paddle. And then they're whacking you across your fanny multiple times. We don't do this today, but this is 1987, 1988. This is initiation, and this is what we did. And if you had a big S stenciled, spray painted on the back, whether it's your bra back or your t-shirt, you were a special case. Sometimes you had to, come here, bite the shillelagh, and they pull you like a dog off somewhere special. They had you sing songs, do dead bug, eat raw eggs and food. Once you get so once I got through the food chute, then you went up to the fat baby's belt. So there's always the fattest person that they could find, multiple of them, because again we had a lot of people, and they took a cherry, and they lathered up the belly, this big fat hairy belly, and with lard and peanut butter and who knows what else, and they stuffed the cherry in the belly button, and then you had to suck it out. I got it. And then it went over to all these toilet bowls, and you had to bob for an apple. So I went to the toilet bowl, came up with the apple. And then they said, "Where's the cherry?" Well, I left it in the bowl, so I had to go get another cherry. Okay? And then, ultimately, back in the back of the ship, there's these 2 turrets that no longer have weapons in them. And they had that filled with green seawater. And you had to go see King Neptune. And you had to, King Neptune had to, had to recite some stuff before they officially made you a shellback. Plus, next to King Neptune was the Queen, who won the beauty contest the night before. And I'll tell you, we had some good-looking guys on there that were dressed up like queens the night before, because we had no women on the ship at the time. And so then once I was announced as a golden shellback or shellback, then I got to dive into that green water, clean myself off, all the filth, strip down naked, throw everything over the side of the ship, go back inside, shower off. So that was my shellback experience.
Shellback initiation. And you didn't have to do that again with the other ships, right?
No, you only do that once. Then you become, as the shellback, you're the one initiating everybody else. Much different today than it was then. I'm not going to say it's worse or better. It's just different, because today they can't experience what I experienced. What they go through today is the best thing that they could go through, because it's what we do.
So jumping a little bit ahead here, were you on board the newer ships that you served in? Did you watch those ceremonies?
Oh, I not only watched them, I coordinated them. So depending how far ahead you want to navigate, so I was a command master chief of a number of different ships, And as a command master chief, I was responsible for writing the notice or the instruction, putting the committee together, approving what we're going to do, taking that to commanding officer for the overall approval of it, and then talking to the chief's mess and putting forth the information on how we're going to do things, setting up the safeties along the way, getting the trusted agents, because not your referees, if you will, to stop things from taking place, because people get caught up in the moment. You want to prevent those opportunities where people get caught up in the moment, and so you have to have people pre-staged along the way to not try to pull somebody off like I was pulled off to do anything special. There are no shillelaghs, things like that. But it's still a great time. Everybody looks forward to it. It's still something special and unique for that individual, unique for that command.
But kind of like mild down as the years went on, right?
Yeah, but a lot better. We do a lot of our different techniques or props or things that we do are based on firefighting, patching busted pipes and things like that. Maybe crawling through a bunch of spaghetti that's kind of gross, and you're still getting woken up early. You're still crawling on your hands and knees, but now you're wearing protection so you don't get cut up on the non-skid and stuff like that. There's still a lot of water. We don't do the beauty contest anymore, but there's still a King Neptune. We don't do the fat baby thing anymore, but there's still different stages along the way that you may have to recite different the Sailor's Creed or your general orders and things, and then we have special stations set aside with different challenges if you don't get it right. It's still good. It's still a fun time.
You read my mind.
Okay.
Yeah, I was wondering if they still did the Royal Baby and the King Neptune.
Yeah, we do King Neptune, but not the Royal Baby.
All right, not the beauty contest though?
Not the beauty contest.
Kind of thought so. All right, so anything else you remember on board the New Jersey?
I can remember when we went on a deployment. There was the USS Ingersoll, is a destroyer, and I don't remember the other ship. There was 3 of us all together. And I can remember being in some really bad storms. And I went up to the bridge one night, and I only went up there to deliver a message. You didn't just go up to the bridge. And I can remember, it must not have been nighttime, it had to be during the day, but I can remember waves crashing, hitting us on the top of turret 2, and whitewater hitting the bridge, and looking and seeing these destroyers. All you see is the top of the mast. The waves are just going over them. And we're rocking. I mean, here we are, Battleship. I remember a TV in our communications office came loose and hit the deck. It was something else. Some of those things.
Do you remember the Pac X? Any ships that sailed with you, or any type of exercise or demonstrations you did?
We always did some sort of exercises or demonstrations.
Whether it be firing the guns or any of the missiles.
I don't remember. Well, we fired missiles, but I don't remember firing the missile. I mean, watching them on closed circuit TV or anything like that. Like I mentioned earlier, I went outside a lot for the firing of the guns. Outside berthing, we had a 5-inch mount, and that was actually louder than the 16-inch higher pitch, so I hated it when we fired the 5-inch. I can remember moving a lot of the ammo for ammo offloads, carrying the 5-inch shells or rolling the 16-inch in the special dollies. I can remember one time we were on deployment, they sounded a collision alarm and found out later that there was a container ship that didn't want to get out of our way. We had the right of way, so we almost hit. And then afterwards, we trained our 16-inch guns and waved bye to the ship.
Well, your collision there, and you used the guns to communicate, right?
Yeah.
All right. You mentioned briefly about, is it at sea ammunition replenishing?
Mm-hmm.
So how was that like?
Well, okay, so you could do those underway replenishments. So there you would take stores, fuel, and ammo. I never had to, as a radioman, I didn't have to participate in a ship this size. We had plenty of people, so I didn't have to participate in actually the unreps. But what I did do is when we did before we went to the yards, you would get all the bullets off the ship. So I can remember participating in the ammo offload and onload anchored out at Seal Beach in California. So that's where I can remember. And one time, me and this other guy, we were rolling the 16-inch, and they're about 1,900 pounds. And the ship kind of rocked a little bit as we were trying to make a turn, and we almost lost the shell over the side.
Oh, so you're actually rolling the live rounds on
Yes.
the deck? Oh, wow. Do you remember safety precautions that were enforced?
I'm sure they were.
Okay.
I'm sure they were.
Because I think the ship being anchored out in bay is part of a safety precaution.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm sure certain distance from land in case there was an explosion, stuff like that. As far as personal safety, other than be careful and don't drop it, I don't know how much more briefing that we, again, don't, but whoever's listening to this is 2018, and I'm talking about something that took place in 1986.
Okay.
You know, we incorporate different safety measures based on things that tend to happen because you can't foresee every possible scenario. Even the two ships where we lost lives last year, I'm sure the Navy has already implemented safety precautions on crew rest, crew sleep, things like that, that were contributing factors to what took place. So perhaps something that we did on that ammo offload led to a safety precaution, but at the time we felt safe.
Well, likely it happened from the Halifax explosion, which was 1917. And I believe from there on, any ship bringing ammunition has to be anchored off the shore, not
there you go.
in the dock. So,
But that's not something that they're going to convey to us. Back in 1985, 84, when I came in, you didn't ask why. You didn't raise your hand and say, why don't we do this pier side? You just do what you're told. And if the chief isn't in your space or looking for you, life is good.
yeah. Do you remember like at sea refueling?
I remember we did it.
Okay.
We tended to give more fuel than we took on. We used to hoist a Shell oil flag because those two little ships that were with us, so we were the gas tank more often than not. We used to say that we could outrun, again, this is a Cold War too, so Russian Navy could chase us, but they'll never catch us, and they'll run out of gas before they ever catch us.
Okay. Do you remember ever crawling through the guns?
No, a friend of mine, Danzy Ruffin, he did. He has his guncockers card, actually. He told me about it, and he and I are the same build. He was a first-class petty officer at the time, later made chief on board here. I was going to, but as soon as he started crawling through, they closed it up from the inside, they put the cover on the outside, they raised that thing and started doing that to him. I wanted no part of it. And he came out the other side, dirty and grimy and gross. I regret it. I wish I would have. But I did leave here with my surface warfare pin. And that was, nowadays everybody gets their ESWAS pin, it's mandatory. But back in 1988, when I got mine, I ended up getting an 89, it's the last thing I did on board. It wasn't a requirement. And to get it on board the battleship, took me a couple tries, times getting through the boards. But when I left here, I was the only radioman with my ESWAS pin designation. And when I went up to my next command, which is Naval Telecommunication Station in Puget Sound, Bangor, Washington, I was the only RM2 I was the only radioman with an SW after my name. The chief didn't even have his pin.
Okay. Do you remember meeting any VIP on board?
No.
No? Okay. Was there ever a family day on board?
Yeah, we had a Tiger cruise from Hawaii back to San Diego. My dad came on board for that.
Okay. Anything you remember from there?
He got bored after about 2 days, and so he went down and started inspecting the galley and just doing whatever mischief he could find himself in. He played bingo, won a buck knife. Yeah, that's what I remember.
Did they demonstrate the guns during family day?
Yes.
How was that like?
They enjoyed it. Yeah, they enjoyed it. So Bruce Townley, who I mentioned earlier, his dad was a state senator. So so his dad and my dad hooked up, and they gave his dad VIP treatment, being a state senator. So my dad got some VIP treatment with him. But no, I didn't. I don't remember meeting any VIPs.
Oh, okay. So when did you leave the New Jersey?
It would have been around March of 1989.
Okay. So that was before the ship was decommissioned. All right. So what was your next duty after that?
I went through another sea school to learn how to repair teletypes before I went to NAVCOM Telstay up at Puget Sound, Bangor, Washington.
Okay.
Nothing significant to report there.
All right. So the next ship you transferred to?
From there, I went to Commander 3rd Fleet, and she was embarked on board the USS Coronado, and they were home ported out of Oahu, Hawaii.
Okay.
And then 6 weeks after I checked on board, they re-home ported to San Diego.
All right. Just for the viewer, you don't mind describing the Coronado?
So she's an amphibious ship, like an LPD at the time, but we had the classification of AGF, which is the classification that they gave the Navy. When I say they gave flagships. So, but before the Coronado was a flagship, she would have been like an LPD.
Okay. Do you remember her hull number?
11.
11? Okay.
AGF 11.
All right. And then after that, you transferred to the destroyer.
So now I went to a shore command. We used to have a program called the Enlisted Education Advancement Program. So when I left 3rd Fleet in 1984 and actually went to college for 2 years as a first class petty officer, and I got my bachelor's degree at San Diego State and left there as a chief petty officer. So I made chief in 1996 and got married to my wife Disa during that time frame. Actually, I got married to her in 93 before we went off to, before I left the ship. And so after I got made chief, in November of 1996 is when we transferred to Yokosuka, Japan on board the USS Hewitt. That's the destroyer.
Okay. So what were your duties on the Hewitt?
So on the Hewitt, I was the chief of radio, or the radio chief. So I oversaw the communications on the ship. And I was there for 9 months. And I was only there for 9 months because the Hewitt did a home port change. And so they gave me a choice to transfer to either the Mobile Bay or the other ship was the Bunker Hill. And the Mobile Bay was the worst ship, had the worst reputation in Japan at the time. So that's where I went. Because you're always best going somewhere that has a bad reputation, because really you can only make things better. And so I did almost 2.5 years on board the Mobile Bay.
Okay. Anything you remember from there?
Mobile Bay was a great ship. I had a great command master chief. I made some great friends. Had a great command. I mean, we weren't doing great at the time, but when you don't do well, it's something that brings the crew together to strive for excellence. Okay. And we went from the worst to the best up there in Yokosuka. We had change of command. We had some change in personnel. The crew was motivated. The crew wanted to improve. We got tasked by the commander to do more, and we succeeded at a lot. I can remember doing all the joint operations. I remember going down. We were called down to East Timor when there was a bunch of hundreds of thousands of East Timorians got killed because they tried to do a democratic election. We got called down there in case there was some unrest, and we were going to work with the Australian forces. We didn't have to, but we went down to that. Just being stationed in Japan, being the ambassador of the United States wherever we went, whatever port visit represented the country, our country. It was just it was a good time. And I left there and I picked up a senior chief before I left. So from that perspective, it's funny. I tell people I think I made senior chief on there not just because I was in charge of communications, but my main collateral duty was I was the public affairs officer. And so I had a number of news articles, and we actually won a couple of Chief of Naval Information awards while I was PIO, and I think that pushed me over the top when I made senior chief.
So what years were you on board the cruiser?
I was on the cruiser, would have been 1996 until 1999.
All right. Briefly describe that conflict you mentioned.
Well, what kind of conflict? What I remember is East Timor they exercised a democratic election process, and they had the military government at the time was killing people who participated, hundreds of thousands, we were told. And so we got emergency underway to head down there and be off the coast in case in case the United States showed some force. That never happened. We never had to show force, but it just goes to that's why we have a forward deployed naval force. That's why we're deployed throughout the world. That's why people will often, people who don't serve in the military will often say, why do we need to project or show our force beyond our country? Well, that's why. I mean, we are kind of the 911 of the world, and people. It's not because we're big brothers. It's not because we want to invade countries or we want to take countries over, but we want freedom for everybody. Freedom of navigation, one of the main charter of the Navy. So that's why we were tasked to go down there.
Okay. So after that, you were transferred to the McCampbell? Or was it the
no, I went to, so we left Mobile Bay and went to Hawaii.
Okay.
And from 99 to 2002, I was the theater satellite manager at Pacific Command, which was at Camp Smith in Oahu. So we did 3 years in Hawaii. And so that's where I was when 9/11 happened. I was getting ready that morning. So Hawaii was 6 hours behind East Coast, 5 or 6 hours. And I remember my wife, we got a phone call early in the morning from her mom telling us to turn on the TV. And so we were watching live what was happening. And I said, I got to go. And I was one of 4 or 5 people that actually made it into work that day. And actually, I parked my car. So Camp Smith was top of this big hill. And the cars were lined up. And I just pulled my car off in the neighborhood and I ran up the hill. And they let me on the gate because we had to set up communications without knowing what was going to take place, what dignitaries and were going to be in the air flying that needed to have communications. So it was our job, the few of us that made it in to the TCCC, to keep the 4-star informed of what was happening, to make sure communications were set up globally, that we had a role in, because PACOM controlled 52% of the globe. But that was just, when that day happened, anybody in uniform, we all went to our duty stations. Even though that was taking place, here I am in Hawaii, that was taking place elsewhere, you didn't know where the next attack was going to be. Even the ships in Pearl were getting underway.
And so where'd you go after that?
So after PACOM, I actually made Master Chief and Command Master Chief, and I went to the USS Nimitz in 2002, and I was like the Third Fleet staff embarked on board the Coronado. I was the Command Master Chief for Commander Carrier Cruiser Destroyer Group 5, Admiral Locklear, embarked on board Nimitz. So I was in Nimitz Strike Group Command Master Chief. And I was there for 13 months. And we deployed 4 months after I got there. And if you remember when 9/11 happened, the USS Abraham Lincoln was on deployment at the time. So she actually stayed deployed for 9.5 months. Nimitz was the ship that relieved her on station. And I was on Nimitz for deployment for 12 months with Admiral Locklear. And then I transferred and went to the USS McCampbell as a destroyer and Command Master Chief.
You remember anything happening during deployment there?
Yeah, we launched a lot of aircraft and we never dropped any weapons. We didn't drop any bullets, which we thought was successful. We still think was successful. Although the pilots want to drop warheads on foreheads, when you don't have to fire a shot, when your presence can just be invoke enough, that's a good thing.
Okay, so that was your first and only carrier you were in,
Yes.
right? All right. Any comparison and contrasting that with your previous ships?
Well, big like the New Jersey, bigger, 6,000 crew member versus 1,500. Being on the flight deck of an aircraft carrier for launch and recovery, watching it at daytime or nighttime, is pretty incredible. And participating in shellback initiation there was unique, as well as a beer day. We got to do beer day on board. In fact, we did beer day on board the New Jersey. And I don't think we were legally allowed to do a beer day, but we had a bunch of alcohol left over from our Australia port visit. And so, not to get anybody in trouble, but we had these motor whale boats. And so the captain had one of the motor whale boats filled with a whole bunch of the beer. And he dropped the other 2 more motor whale boats, and he let the crew cycle through, go away from the ship, have a couple beers, and come back. So we weren't technically drinking on board the ship. Man, I'll tell you, like I said, us junior sailors, we thought that was fantastic. Chief petty officers wanted no part of it. Drove them crazy. And then we did an official beer day on board the Nimitz. And that got kind of crazy. We had people selling beer, and we ended up taking a lot of sailors to mass because they got drunk underway and stuff. But being on a carrier, you have everything. I mean, you have food 24 hours a day, gym 24 hours a day. People, it's a city at sea, but the city never sleeps. You can be doing flight ops all hours of the day and night. It's just, pretty incredible.
So getting transferred to the Campbell, what was that like?
It was a destroyer, back to, it was a different destroyer. I was on a Spruance class destroyer. This was an Arleigh Burke destroyer. She, 300-person crew, stealthy, cuts through the water smoothly. It's got a very air conditioned because of the way she's designed to keep the air conditioning in. Launching, had over 100 Tomahawk missiles that we were able to launch. We deployed on there, did what was called a carrot deployment. Did a Fifth Fleet deployment also, but the carrot deployment, we hit like 11 different countries on that deployment. Again, our deployments aren't just to show a force, but to build relations. We would pull into Singapore or Thailand, and we would do outreaches through painting of orphanages or providing meals to orphanages, doing community services. We'd do soccer matches and things, and people would say, why do we do these events? Well, you could be playing soccer with a future Chief of Naval Operations of that Navy, and although we may be allies today, we could be enemies tomorrow, and that young officer that you could be playing with, soccer with, might be that admiral of that country that you're no longer friends with. Like, I'm hearing what our government's saying, but my experience with those U.S. Navy is not what our government's saying about them. And so it's so much, what we do is as much as an ambassador, and sometimes has a greater impact than the force that we can show. So it was neat to be part of doing that kind of work.
Right. So your duties on the McCampbell were the same as the Hewitt?
No, because the Hewitt, I was the Chief Petty Officer, E7, so I was in charge of communications specifically. Ran my division of a dozen or so personnel, stand quarterdeck watch, things like that. My duties as a Command Master Chief, on the McCampbell, now I'm an E9, I'm the senior enlisted leader to that commanding officer. So when in the Navy we call it the Command Triad, your commanding officer, executive officer, and the Command Master Chief. So I'm the representative of all the enlisted. But I also represent the wardroom and the officers as well. So as a Command Triad, we do that decision-making process. A Command Master Chief, we're as high as we can go as an A9. So we're expected to be bold and frank, respectful and honest. Shut that door, and at times tell the captain that he or she is wrong, and that their idea is not the best, and that this is some of the negative impact that it's going to have on the crew morale. You're not going to make everybody happy with the decisions, but my job is to protect the crew, look out for them, and to make the captain's stock go up, and look out for that person. Does that mean that the captain always takes my recommendations or advice? Absolutely not. But he doesn't have to. I just got to, like the Chief of Staff to the President, giving some of that frank advice. Listen, I'm not going to get another promotion. I'm not going to get another raise from that CO. And so I just try to be that sounding board. I've been kicked out of the office of my commanding officers more than one occasion. I've had the phone hung up on me more than one time. I've had my chief's mess get mad at me because they don't think I got their back. Got it. But at the end of the day, none of my COs got fired. They all succeeded. Our crews were taken care of. Not every decision that they made was the right one, but you know what? When they made that wrong decision that went against what I said, then not only did my stock personally go up, but the stock as a Command Master Chief goes up. So the farther that commanding officer goes, how they deal with future Command Master Chiefs will be different, as well as that executive officer who's observing all this. Because I want to make sure that executive officer listens to their Command Master Chief when they're in command someday. And so the more often I can be right than wrong builds their confidence. And so really it wasn't ever about me. It was about the job or the title of Command Master Chief, and how they're going to listen to their future CMCs.
Okay. So after McCampbell, you went to Macon Island?
Macon Island. So that was a brand new, first of its class, Wasp class ship. but she's going to be a Wasp-class ship with gas turbo generators. So a big deck amphib with gas turbo generators like we have on our cruisers and destroyers. So I was like the 12th crew member on board. I was a plank owner on that ship, and I served 3 years on there, all during the construction phases. Hurricane Katrina hit during that time frame, and so we were delayed in our delivery a number of times. So I actually saw the ship delivered to the Navy, but I didn't see the ship commissioned as a crew member.
Okay. So the last ship you were in was the Pelu?
Pelu, yeah. So I left Macon Island, went to a shore duty at Assault Craft Unit 5, which were hovercraft up in Camp Pendleton, and then I left ACU 5, went to USS Pelu, which was the oldest amphib in the Navy at the time.
Right. So how were these ships like?
The Pelu was a great ship. One thing, going from at one point the newest ship to the Navy to the oldest ship to the Navy. Now the McCampbell, she was a new ship as well. I was the second command master chief on board there. The ship had been commissioned about 6 months when I got in there. And after a ship commissions, it's under warranty. So anything breaks or goes wrong, you're going to call the manufacturer or the warranty person. When you're on a ship that's 30 years or older, like the Pelu, there's not a warranty. So it takes a lot of sweat, a lot of guts and blood, and a lot of duct tape to keep her running. And you talk about, there's just a certain amount of pride that a sailor puts in an old steamship. Those engineers, just like on board the New Jersey, I can't is not in their vocabulary. And I'm tired is also not in their vocabulary. They're always going to be the whitest person on the ship. And I don't care what color their skin is from a race standpoint, they don't get sunlight. They work 6 on, 6 off. They work for months 6 on and 6 off. They're the first to show up before you go on deployment, they're the last to leave, or they're the first there before you get under the way, the last to go home, if they get to go home. The Pelu, I had a fantastic commanding officer and executive officer. We were a fun triad to work with, but that wasn't the best ship when I got there. And they had just come back from deployment, and on that deployment, the commanding officer got fired, and the executive officer, who became the CO, was not fleeted up. And on those ships, the XO fleets up to be the CO. They do 18 months as the XO, 18 months as a CO. So he did not get fleeted up. So, for whatever reason. So his change of command, when they got back from deployment, the commanding officer who was flown out to the ship, who was the chief of staff of the expeditionary ESG-3 at the time, they saluted each other on the quarterdeck, shook their hands. I got it. Now you got it. Bye-bye. That was the change of command. So we had a lot of work to do, the Captain XO and I. And it took about 6 months, not for us to align, but it's all about setting standards. And when people like standards, just like when you go bowling, you know where the gutters are, you know the consequences if you throw your ball too far left or too far right. And sailors like standards. They really like to know where their boundaries are, where the gutters are. And before we got there, didn't feel like there was really any standards. If you got a driving under the influence charge, you might go to Captain's Master, you might not. We enforced some standards. People knew what to expect from us, and they knew what we expected of them. It didn't take much time for us to be a great ship.
So what year was this when you served on the Pelu?
Pelu was 2010 to 2012.
All right, so this is getting close to the...
close to the end.
Yeah, okay.
I thought that would be my last tour. When you show up to a ship as a command master chief, really, when you show up in a leadership position, you bring your crew together, whether your crew is your division, your department, or your ship. And this is my leadership philosophies. When I showed up on the McCampbell, I had a page and a half of this is the do's and the don'ts of what I expect of the chief's master, what they expect of me, and they're falling asleep 30 minutes in. When I showed up to the Pelu, I had 3 words. We're going to be professional, we're going to show pride, and we're going to perform. And this is how we're going to do it, and talked for about 2 minutes, and then I walked out. And I told them, listen, I'm here until I retire, so you're going to have to catch up with me and keep up with me if you want to succeed. And you will, because we're going to succeed.
Okay. So, of all the previous ship you served in, is there anything you remember, like events pulling into ports that stand out, or VIP who came aboard?
I'll tell you, when you get to be 52 years old, there's a lot of good memories, but the things that shape somebody are the bad ones. And I think that as leaders, I tell you, some of the best leadership principles I learned, I got from bad leaders, not from good ones. Good leaders made me feel good. Bad leaders showed me what not to do. I have good memories and bad memories from every. I can remember on board the New Jersey, I was caught sleeping sleeping by my department head. I was not a good sailor on board this ship my first 12 to 15 months on here. And I had chiefs that were out to get me. They were doing what they could to get me to captain's mast. They took my ID card and wouldn't let me off the ship when the ship pulled into port that time. So those are things that they did. We had Liberty cards and they refused to give me my Liberty card. I had my promotion recommendation pulled for going up for the E5 exam. I was married once before, and I got married when I was on here. And that started the change because I was no longer responsible just for me. I was responsible for somebody else. And for me to say, hey, honey, I can't come home tonight because I got in trouble. And I either had to give them my ID card or go to captain's mast. But that showed me that I had to change what I was doing. And that deployment started making those changes. And I would tell you, we used to get these emergency action exercises as communications. And we got one called a beard iron. And beard iron, you have 5 minutes in order to catch it and make a call and respond. And I was on watch and I caught it and I did it. And I'll tell you that was a turning point to how those chiefs started looking and treating me. But the shellback initiation is crazy, and I didn't even give you there was stuff that I didn't talk about that I witnessed and that I saw and how they treated people. Not good memories, but you know what? They showed me some stuff. And some life changes that took place with me on board. And every ship, the people, the mistakes that I made that helped shape who I was. Fortunately, the mistakes that I made never impacted directly other people, never hurt the ship. But you learn how you could have done things better. And I had some really graceful leaders along the way. On the Mobile Bay, I mean, there were more COs and command master chiefs that came out of that ship and that chief's mess in those 2.5 years. My communication officer was a guy named Chris Signa. And so Chris left, and we stayed in touch for a lot of years. But he ended up getting brain cancer when he was stationed on the East Coast. And he was literally on his deathbed when he made 06. And he'd already commanded a Arleigh-Burke destroyer on the East Coast. And so I think it was one of the vice chiefs of naval operations, or the assistant, came and promoted him and asked him, Chris, where do you want to go? You're up for major command. He said, Mobile Bay. And that's just the kind of ship that was. So, and Chris was just, so he was my combo for, God, over a year on there. He was he's a nuclear waste. Failed out of nuke school. So he showed up as an O2. But he was a guy that listened to the chief, and we grew together. I had one personal award, Navy Achievement Medal up to that point, and we went through an installation of our network on board that ship, and he put me in for a Navy Achievement Medal. Everything has great memories. When I was on board the New Jersey, when I was on board the Nimitz, so the command master chief was a guy named Lee Turner. And Lee and I looked like twins, and we were getting ready for deployment. And we had a big deployment get-together of all, because on an aircraft carrier, you have your carrier, COXO, command master chief, then you had the staff's admiral, chief of staff, command master chief, and then you had the air wing. There was about 10 commanding officers, executive officers, and command master chiefs. So they brought us leaders together. And I can remember sitting in the back, eating some chow, and I see my wife go up, and she walks over behind Lee and grabs him around the waist because she thought it was me. And he whips around and says, oh! She's like, my husband! Just silly things like that. I can remember Admiral Locklear, when we pulled into port, he'd always say, raise a hand, who's going to get in trouble? And just the individual accountability, or him always telling people, always always expect more from your sailors than they can expect of themselves. They'll rise to the occasion. Walt Joller was a chief of staff. He got killed some years later on a bicycle accident, freak accident. But that guy used to ride his bike to work from Rancho Bernardo in San Diego. It's just different memories along the way. The McCampbell. And I'll tell you, Command Master Chief, the memories aren't as good. You know, you do a lot of sexual assaults. You do a lot of domestic violence. You're there for a lot of negative than you are positive. And you kind of, I'd go down to the mess decks and talk to sailors just to brighten my day. Because they're so amazing. You go into combat when they're doing drills and exercises, because these young sailors don't recognize the just the impact that they're having, the significance of what they're doing when they're practicing to launch those missiles and they're 21 years old. Yeah, a lot of fun. It was good.
So back to New Jersey, do you remember firing off the boilers?
Yeah. So when I was going off for my ESWAS pin, Enlisted Surface Warfare Specialist, you know, to be you got to be knowledgeable, not proficient, just knowledgeable of every facet of your ship. You got to know your ship, and there's oral boards along the way. So to understand the engineering, I had to go down there to learn how to light off the boiler. You had to draw the whole steam cycle and stuff. So this warrant officer, there was a warrant officer, I don't remember his name, but he was the guy that motivated to get my ESWAS pin. And he's like, "Come on, Dearie, you're going to light off the boiler." And so he gave me the torch. We lit the torch, threw the gas up. Man, I shoved that thing. It's scary because, you know, well, they make it sound scary, true or not. But, you know, if you don't do it fast enough, or if you don't have the right mixture, you're going to blow the boiler, which is going to explode and kill everybody on board. But, you know, just the whoof, the sound, I mean, you know when it's lit. It's not like when you light your barbecue, it's like, man, did it light? Or looking in there? No, you hear it and you feel it, and that thing lights. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Not too many radiomen probably get to light the boilers on.
All right, we're getting towards the end of our interview, so let's talk about your process of leaving the Navy and your post-Navy life.
Sure.
So shortly after leaving the Peleliu, what happened after?
So I was interviewed for a job as the Navy Region Southwest Command Master Chief. So there's 10 regions in the Navy. Southwest was the biggest region at the time. Worked for a 2-star admiral by the name of Dixon Smith. And then Dixon moved on, and I worked for a guy named Boog Lorge, and Admiral Lorge. Patrick, first name Boog, he's an aviator. Dixon was a black shoe. Did my interview while I was on deployment on the Peleliu, and doing a video teleconference, and I can remember Dixon asking, "Well, what color shoes do you wear?" Because as a chief petty officer, you wear black shoes or brown shoes. Aviators always wear brown shoes. Surface sailors, we wear black. And so I told the Admiral, "Well, what day of the week is it?" Because on Tuesdays and Thursdays I would wear brown shoes, because the Peleliu was an aviation ship as well as a surface ship. And so I said, Monday, Wednesday, Friday I wear black, Tuesday, Thursday brown. So as the Region Command Master Chief, he hired me obviously. I was probably the only one that interviewed, so we had no choice. But as the Region Master Chief, Command Naval Installations Command, we're in charge of all the resources available on the base. All the tenant commands, we make sure their power, we make sure the ships have electricity and things that need the services on the pier. We make sure that people can park. We take care of the housing. We take care of morale, welfare, and rec. We run everything military family. So I had 10 installation command master chiefs that indirectly reported to me. They report to their commanding officer of the respective installation, but I'm their advocate to the admiral. And so I went from Fallon, Nevada, all the way down to Southern California. So I got to help ensure that our military families were taken care of. Over 100,000 of those military families across a number of bases on the West Coast and Region Southwest. During that time, you know, when your region command master chief, you know, your sphere of influence is that much bigger. I was able to start a couple leadership programs. I started a nonprofit actually called the Enlisted Leadership Foundation that I'm still part of today, and we run leadership development programs out of San Diego that we have sailors and other military who travel from all over the country and from overseas to participate in. And then towards the end of my career, the Master Chief of the Navy had asked me to consider 2 jobs. And during that consideration process, when I was preparing to re-enlist one more time, I was already at 30 years, I got a call from a company, United Services Automobile Association, USAA. So they are a full-service financial company for the military community, and there's 40 positions that they have called military affairs representatives. San Diego, there's 2 MA reps, 1 Marine and 1 sailor. And the guy who was the sailor, retired command master, did it for 14 years. And he was leaving the company, he was retiring. And he's like, "I would love for you to be my replacement." And so I talked about it with my wife, we prayed about it for about a week, and said, you know, the fun has to end. And to be able to transition out of uniform into a job, and not just any job, but into a job where I continued to serve the military community just for a different company. I tell you, I couldn't ask for anything more. So I went back to the Master Chief of the Navy and my Force Master Chief and Admiral Lorch, and I said, listen, I'm going to have to be done. This is what's going on. And so I gave them notice 6 months before I even interviewed for the job. I interviewed for the job, got the job. 6 weeks later, I came out of uniform, took 2 weeks off work, and started.
Did you have a retirement ceremony?
I did. So I had a ceremony after I started work and during my terminal leave. Usually you do it before you start terminal leave. And so I was on board the USS Midway. I did on board Midway because after 9/11, we try to get visitors and guests on board any military installation is rather challenging. Retiring from Southern California, from San Diego, and having all kinds of family and relatives there, I wanted to do it someplace that didn't require a lot of access, and so I did it on board Midway, and I do a lot of work with the Midway Museum anyways. And so, yeah, we had about 300 people show up that day on the flight deck. It was a lot of fun. It was a great ceremony for me. I'm told it was a great ceremony by others. So I did a ceremony in April of 2015.
Okay, so transitioning away from your Navy life, is there any impact that the Navy service had for you?
It's who I am today.
Okay.
I mean, I came in at 18. I left it when I was turning 50. It's all I know. It's all I knew.
Right.
And I think after I left, no, I don't think. I know that after I left, I see even more of an impact. Some of it not always positive, admittedly. When you're separated from your family, it's what we do. It's what we do. Like my wife will say, and she'll tell other spouses, is what you sign up for. And as much as I try to put my wife in the driver's seat or my family, I think my first love for a lot of years was my sailors in the Navy. I'm a Christian. It was my missions field. They knew that. And when I was home, I tried to be home. But I did not realize how much the Navy was part of me until after I left. And so it's been a neat, not a new chapter, but a new book to start to write, the post-Navy career. And it's fun to go back and look at the past one. And it's fun to work at a company that allows me to continue serving. And it's fun to be part of a nonprofit where we're giving back. But I have no regrets, and I absolutely don't miss it. But I don't want it again, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I can attest to that.
Yeah.
Right. So is this your first time back to the New Jersey?
It is.
Okay. What was your initial reaction when you saw the ship?
She looks good. She looks good. She looks pretty. She looks like she did the day I left. Even having the cannon that tarps up on the back is not unrealistic on a ship today. We often had them on back if we were going to do a party or when we were open tours, things like that. Seeing the harpoon launchers, seeing the 16-inch or the 5-inch. Kind of different seeing permanently placed stairs, but and 62 looks good. Yeah, she looks good.
Okay, so I'm going to ask...
Teakwood is really worn down. Teakwood looks like crap, but can't help that.
Yeah.
I'd rather see the crappy teakwood than put a bunch of non-skid or something over the top, because that's what I tell you, these ships, the teakwood, man, always good.
We're replacing them section by section as we speak, so we're doing our best.
Oh, fine.
Yeah. So I'm going to end it with a few closing questions.
Go ahead.
So first, is there anything that I didn't ask about that you'd like to add? No? Okay. So here's a legacy question. Thinking like years from now, because potential listeners who might be watching and listening to this could be people from like 25, 50, maybe even 100 years from now who are going to listen and watch our words and learn about us. the military history, history of the United States. Is there anything you'd like to say, just to leave a message to them?
You know, it's okay to say thank you for your service when you see somebody wearing a ball cap or a patch. Don't say, you know, don't say I disagree with this, but I support you. You know, support the government decisions that we're making. Just because you don't understand why we have to go in and fight some wars, or why we take the fight away from our country, doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do. So if you're going to support, you know, support the decision that we have to support decisions that's made that sends us into harm's way. So support those decisions as well. Don't just support us. It's not the same. I mean, you're not gonna love your kid any less when they marry somebody that you don't really want them to marry. No, you're gonna support them. Show the same to those that serve.
All right. Well, then this concludes our interview. Master Chief Dearie, I want to thank you for your service and taking the time to join us. And once again, welcome back aboard the Battleship New Jersey.
Oh yeah.
Yes, so this concludes our interview, and once again, my name is Hugh Sung. I am a staff member on board the Battleship New Jersey's Oral History Program here in Camden, New Jersey, and today is Wednesday, July 11th, 2018, and our interview guest was Master Chief Dearie from Murrieta, California. This recording and any transcript, abstracts, or indexes made from the recordings will be restored in the Oral History Department of the Battleship New Jersey, the Library of Congress Veterans History Project, and the New Jersey State Library System. All recordings will be made available to writers, researchers, teachers, and historians. And this is Hugh Sung. I'm signing off.